How we doing, guys? And welcome back to another episode of the Richie Hicks Jr. Sports Podcast. With me, my good friend and my co-host, Mr. Mike Zappy, out in San Antonio, Texas.
What's going on, bud? Let me tell you one thing. It is a good time to be a Rangers fan. Look at this. Ever since I made this, we have been in first place. I mean, four All-Stars named to the starting lineup in the American League, man. I'm so excited about this upcoming All-Star game. And even more impressive is to see that two rookies, one in the American League, one in the National League, first time in Major League Baseball history, they will be starting in the All-Star game, with that being my two Rookie of the Year picks this season. So I'm excited, man. I'm so happy to see Josh Young out there, to see what he's been doing this year for the Rangers, and to see him beat out Matt Olson for the starting spot, and then to see Corey Seager finally get in there. Obviously, this is another visit for Marcus Semien, and then to see Jonah Heim make the All-Star break, man. It's like the guy just was not getting the recognition he deserved, and he finally made it, man. It's a good time. I can't wait to see what they do with the pitchers, though.
Texas Rangers leading the way for the American League with 4 starters. Dodgers and Braves each lead the National League with 3 starting selections. A lot of first-timers. This is a different-looking All-Star game. One of the obvious incumbents, my guy, Mr. Aaron Judge, selected to his 5th All-Star game. Barring a minor miracle, he will not be active, and I am more than okay with that. We got to get him right with that ligament in his toe. The great Shohei Ohtani, I would have to think way too early prediction for All-Star Game MVP.
I think it's already written down. I think this season has been written down for a long time. And then you consider that it came right after the WBC, in which Shohei led Japan in a victory against USA, with the final at bat being against Mike Trout. I mean, there's too much right now. Here, let me give you an interesting stat right now. Last year, through 82 games, Aaron Judge hit his 30th home run. This year, Shohei hit his 30th home run in his 83rd game. He has been hot. He has hit 14 home runs this month. This guy is on to something. The way the season started compared to now, I think we're at that point, buddy. I think we're at that point.
He's going to fall 3 short at 59. But, nonetheless, a phenomenal season that young man is having. America's MVP, Shohei Ohtani. Just to let the viewers know, we are also going to be speaking on where does the buck stop, talking about Mr. Showalter and how much time he has left in Queens. We're going to talk about what the hell is going on in Queens. We're going to speak on some buyers or sellers who needs to do that with the upcoming MLB trade deadline. We're also going to hit on no safe bets, NFL cracking down on gambling, and we're going to hit on an NBA roundtable involving James Harden as well as Dame Lillard's futures. Shout out Josh Hart coming back to the New York Knicks. I'm stoked about that. But back to this MLB All-Star game. What's your prediction? You got one?
I'm predicting an exciting game.
Yeah, I see it.
Like, if you look at the talent that made the All-Star game between, let's talk about Ellie De La Cruz or Ronald Acuna in the National League. Those guys are exciting players to watch. And then let's be real, as we are now at the midway point through the season, after getting to see how the expedited clock was going to work against MLB, we were against it. I love it now even more than when I loved it back in April when I went to go see the Rangers and Yankees play. It has brought the viewership up. There's more runs being scored. I think this is going to be an exciting All-Star game.
And extended alcohol sales for the guys who don't mind hanging out after the game a little bit and tailgating again.
And not only that,
refiring the grill.
Just that, and then being able to run up the stairs in between the middle of the night to go grab that beer one last time before whoever comes out to save the game or whatever the case may be. It's like Yeah, I think this is going to be a very exciting one. I think Shohei will pitch 2 innings. I think he's going to be the American League starter. Uvalde had that opportunity. I think Garrett Cole did too, but I think they've both
They
have
got
had
it right, and I'll tell you why they got it right. Because it's about marketability. I think you can make a logical argument that if all players, Nathan Eovaldi deserved the nod over both? To be honest with you, to a level, I'm going to say yes. But no offense to your guy, he just doesn't have the marketability of a Shohei right now. And, you got to cave to an extent similar to Judge last year. Oddly enough, I was watching some of our old episodes speaking about Judge. And I must say, it's Shohei's year. And I admit that. And, it's going to be so interesting to not only see where the Angels end up, but to see if this truly is indeed Shohei's last ride as an Angel, or if they do something very special that perhaps keeps him in Los Angeles.
And I thought with Shohei that as far as the Cy Young goes, I'm wearing his jersey right now. I think he's the only guy that would actually be putting up a legitimate fight if it wasn't for Tommy John. But my boy, Jacob DeGrom, yeah, man, what Shohei's doing is just an unbelievable thing right now.
I mean, it's kind of uncharted waters because when you look at what the Bambino did, it's spread out in different junctures of his career, and no knock on the great Babe Ruth. I'm not going to get into a debate about his slugging prowess. But in terms of pitching in this era, dude, nobody's really ever done this before on this level. A guy who could hit 30 to 40 home runs a year, a guy who's going to hit in between 265 and 300 for a year. He's having an uptick in terms of batting average compared to a couple of previous years. If there's a knock or something that you must nitpick, the only thing that I'll nitpick is that, with the exception of being on the bump, he doesn't play the field. That's literally it. It's hard to really find something past that. But you know how we talk about DHs, how are getting more glorified and more recognition in today's MLB. You take a guy like a Big Papi, Edgar Martinez. Those are the typical guys that were phenomenal DHs. In addition to being a top 5 pitcher, top 10 pitcher, wherever you choose to put him. I think that's based on a year-to-year basis. Bigger than that, he's. I think when it's all said and done, he's going to go down as probably the greatest designated hitter of all time.
I would say though, with a Shohei, is if he was going to play the field, if there's one position I think fits him perfectly, just because of the way he runs, the guy can read the ball. He's real good at that. I think he'd be an excellent right fielder.
I tend to agree, and I think the reason why the Angels opted to get him out of the field is because you saw it early on. The kid was getting dinged up a little too frequently, because guys who make the transition from no longer playing the field, it's usually an age thing or a miles thing. In his case, it's not an age or a miles thing. Miles to a level, because I don't think people take into account his Japanese career or how he's been on a showcase since an early age. But more so than that, the man pitches once or twice a week for a full season. That's a lot.
But the reason why I agree with it too, though, is this guy's about to get $55 million per.
Yeah, he's gonna shatter the market.
He's gonna shatter the market, and if you're the Angels and you know that you're still trying to convince him to stay, you've got to ensure that you have longevity in his future and you prolong that career as much as you can. And like you said, he will go down as the greatest DH, in my opinion. He won't go down as the greatest pitcher. We've already talked about that. But
listen, at the end of the day, during the course of his, you hope, at least 20-year career, 15 at least, 20 hopefully, when it's all said and done, if this guy during his era was a top 15 pitcher, top 20 pitcher, in addition to what he does offensively, it's remarkable. There's nothing to debate in terms of that. Last season, I don't think Aaron Judge won the MVP just because of 62. I think all in all, he was the better offensive player.
And he was in the running for the Triple Crown.
And it also helped that the Yankees were having the kind of season they had versus the kind of season the Angels didn't have. Because I did allude to this in the beginning of the season on some of our baseball previews, that I felt that in order for Shohei to come full circle with MVP accolades and consideration, the Angels needed to at least be a wild card or be in the mix. They are in a similar place where they were a couple of years ago before they imploded. But there's no reason to feel that this particular brand of Angels baseball is going to implode. Mike Trout's having fun. It's nice to see these guys finally putting something together when you look at them on paper and say, these guys are supposed to be better than they are. It looks like the Angels are starting to play for each other. And, you got a stacked American League West. You've got a stacked American League East. And one of these two divisions is going to be sending 3 teams to the playoffs, and it may very well be decided in the final week of the season because that's how tight things are.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
It's in regards to Shohei, and it's actually a very similar question to Aaron Judge.
All right.
So last year, we saw what Aaron Judge did. We saw that he bet on himself. He
Indeed.
got the contract he wanted. Will the Angels trade him, and will they not, based on the simple fact that what if he does get to 63, or say he gets to 59, and he did it as an Angel, and they make the wild card, is that enough to convince him to stay in Los Angeles, to stay right there?
I don't believe him leaving is necessarily based on how well this year ends. I think ultimately what it comes down to is, does he feel that he can have sustainable success in that organization? Because at the end of the day, although Mike Trout is not an old man by baseball acumen, he is an old man in terms of miles. And I also believe that similar to what Aaron Judge did last year is kind of what's happening this year with the Los Angeles Angels. I believe that Shohei has been a one-man show. I'm not saying that he hasn't got contributions from other Angels. I'm saying that he is elevating their situation because of the entity that he is in both the diamond and as the incredible hitter that he is in just his presence. When you put a guy like that in the lineup, other guys are going to have better opportunities. It's not science. It's not that complicated. But I do eerily, when I look at the situation of what the Angels are without him versus what they are with him, we've seen it this year with my New York Yankees. When Judge is not there, they are a very average, flat team. When Judge is there, they have a chance to win a world championship. And there's really not a lot of in between. And I think it speaks volumes on what a guy like a Shohei, what a guy like an Aaron Judge bring to the table. And if you want to back it up, say about 20 or so years, it's similar to what a guy like Ken Griffey Jr. brought. Because even a guy like Mark McGwire, when shattering records and all that, he didn't have that big impact in the sense of like, he takes over a game and they win. No, he hits a lot of home runs. Ken Griffey Jr. did it in a way where he made baseball popular because of his phenomenal catches, because he had the prettiest stroke known to any and all baseball fans. And, he made baseball cool. And I think that Shohei, in the ever-changing who's the new face of MLB, Fernando Tatis had it for a very short while before hurting his own agenda. Aaron Judge has flirted with being the face of baseball. I think the one thing that makes it a little more difficult for Shohei is the language barrier. But at the same time, the beauty of a Shohei is that he makes the game global. Not that the game isn't global, but that it is opening more eyes. And then you talk about the wonderful World Baseball Classic, and you had some phenomenal moments, whether it was him striking out his teammate Mike Trout, whether it was Puerto Rico winning a very emotional game against the Dominican Republic. You had a lot of ups and downs, which I think got people fired up for baseball. And I think it really helped getting people psyched for opening day and everything that followed. World Baseball Classic, in my opinion, huge win this year.
Oh, gosh, man, huge win. And like I said, all I ever think about is that pitch, Shohei versus Trout, and I think that's what
Yeah,
set the
that was
tone of.
intense.
That was intense.
That was
And
incredibly intense. And since we're talking about Shohei, we might as well go here. Buy or sell?
I was hoping you go to.
Let's start with the Angels since we're talking about Shohei, and then we're going to move it around. I understand that this man is in the process of potentially challenging for the American League home run record and maybe even further than that if he really gets hot. The Angels look like they have a legitimate chance to play in the postseason. But this is the bigger question. Is it worth keeping Shohei for the year if you can trade him when he'll never be a hotter commodity?
Oh, man, I'm going to give you two answers to that one. So, obviously, when you're a team that is in the playoff picture and you really look at the American League right now, I think the Red Sox are falling off.
Yes.
I think
after they shot the Yankees down, I think the reality has set in. They're not a very good ball club.
They're not a good ball club. The Mariners, in my opinion, not a good ball club, although I think they'll be buyers.
Massive underachievers, and yes, I agree. They will buy.
And then you look at the Central. The Guardians have shown up. They are now right there. They're going to win that division.
But will they pull the Milwaukee Brewers and trade assets despite being in a position to win that division?
And that's what's going to lead me to this. I think the Angels should be buyers at the deadline. The reason why is if you are all in, you want to keep Shohei, you need to show him that you're willing to go get the talent around him. See, there's two guys that come to mind right now, and that's Sonny Gray, and that is Max Scherzer. No, Max Scherzer. Okay. Because I look at the Mets, I think it's time to – I've been thinking it's time. And I think Max Scherzer is going to be a big trade commodity this coming up here in the next month. But if you're the Angels, if you're really trying to convince them that you're willing to bring in talent to help you win, Shohei is your ace. He's your number one. Max Scherzer has now taken that step back in his career that he would be the perfect number two. Or if you bring in a Sonny Gray, you're bringing him back to the AL West, which he had a phenomenal career with while he was with the Oakland Athletics. So,
good point, Zappy. Very good point.
But if I'm looking at, I know I'm not going to keep Shohei, then yeah, you sell, and it's going to be the biggest trade package we have seen in Major League Baseball history. Last year's Juan Soto deal was a pretty big one as well. That won't compare to this. So there's two ways. The Angels have to really think long and hard. Are we going all in on this year to convince Shohei with the chance of losing him, or are we going all in on our future? Which, and I always allude.
I just don't see how. I don't think they literally riot, but I just don't see how you can move him at the deadline. What message are you sending your fan base? That you are
message.
And it's one thing if you trade the best player in baseball if your team sucks. It's another thing if you trade the best player in baseball when your team has an opportunity to do something special in October. And that's what the Angels have in front of them right now.
This is almost
their point. Angels have to be buyers.
And this is almost a Babe Ruth Boston Red Sox situation, if you really think about it. The season that Shohei is having is incredible. We've already talked about this. But would you really trade him in the middle of a season? It's just there's so much, there's so many positives I can take out of it and so many negatives I can take out of it, And it just, when you have been kind of the laughingstock of the American League West, and not so much the Athletics, because it's been expected from the A's because of the Billy Bean style.
Yeah, but when you have that kind of money that you're sinking in, because you got to think they gave Pujols that big old contract, and then they gave Anthony Rendon money. And he's going to
money.
I'm not even trying to be a comedian right now. I'm curious if the Mets move a Scherzer contract and try to get some kind of prospects in return. I actually am curious to see if maybe Rendon is coming to Queens to alleviate some of that issue that the Mets have at third. I'm not saying that he is the end-all, be-all solution because he's seen better days. But at the same time, I still view it as an upgrade for the Mets.
That'd be an interesting one right there.
Because if there's a player that the Angels could part with, he would be the guy, I would think. like a current
Yeah.
player. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that also, if you think back to earlier in the year where Rendon grabbed that fan that was harassing him because he had called him a bitch,
yeah,
that put a bad image on your team. It
yeah.
almost feels like the Angels are turning into the Athletics, and that's why the A's are going to we got to take this opportunity and move to Vegas. Um, Rendon's a good one. I like that one. I do. I
I mean,
think
I
that's
could
a
be
really
so
good
off
one.
base because I still think it's going to be centered around what you can possibly pluck from their farm. But the Mets are not the ones with the leverage. You overpaid Verlander. That's a friggin' ridiculous situation. And things are just not meshing. And you said it off air, and I'm going to repeat what you said. It's not just the Edwin Diaz thing. This is deeper than that because, at the end of the day, guys are not putting it all out there. I mean, Scherzer pitched well today. I'll give him that. It's a game they could have won. Starling Marte strikes out with the bases loaded. But this is a team that it seems like they can't get out of their own way. And I think after a while, especially playing in the New York market when things aren't going your way and when there's heightened expectations, it can be a very lonely place when you're a loser. And that leads me to ask you this: where is he going?
I mean, think about it. The Mets were 29-27 going into the month of June. In the month of June, they were 7-18 and now sit at 36-45. Steve Cohen came on yesterday talking about his frustrations with the team and things have to change. They go out there and lose that game to the Brewers, and then they come back today and lose again. Where do things go with this Mets team?
This is how I see it. Sorry to interrupt you. Year one of the Cohen era, they fizzle out. They win that series against the Yankees, the 9-11 series. And then right after that, they fizzle out. Last year, they were flirting with the division title. They broke a Major League Baseball record in a dubious way for having the most days in first place, but still not winning the East. They get a three-game series against a very good Padre team last year, a team that's not good this year. And they lose 2 out of 3 in Queens. The only guy who got a win was your boy, Jacob deGrom, who's not going to throw a baseball for a long time, unfortunately. And now you also move on from Chris Bassett. You also move on from Taijuan Walker. And now you have 2 dinosaurs. 2 Hall of Fame, future Hall of Fame dinosaurs, but 2 dinosaurs nonetheless. And things are just not meshing the way that they expected.
No.
The Door's overrated. Sorry, not sorry. For the money he makes, he's overrated. Starling Marte's another guy that could be on the move. He could be going to the Angels. He could be going to a team that needs an outfielder. There's this team in the Bronx that could use a little help.
Yeah, but let's be real. Marte's not going to be traded to the Yankees.
No, not to the Yankees. No, hell no. They would rather feed him to one of our opponents. They would send him to Toronto. They would send him to Tampa maybe if they got like a nice little return of but he certainly, or even Baltimore for that matter, but he certainly will not be in a Yankee uniform.
No, I think when you look at this Mets team, I think you're in the right position because one, yes, I think you got to blow it up, but first you have to start off with the GM. Buck Showalter has got to go. We've seen it's the same story. We've seen this one over and over again with him. He's got to go.
Yeah.
I think he's a better commentator.
Normally it doesn't burn out this quickly.
No,
because
absolutely
in past
not.
Buck Showalter stints, he has sustained a decent amount of success before they get tired, whether it was the Orioles, whether it was the Yankees. With the Yankees, when he left, it wasn't about his performance as a manager. It was about the inability of him and Steinbrenner to truly get along. A lot of people viewed the Joe Torre hiring as a yes man. I'll never forget the headlines. They used to call him Clueless Joe.
Clueless Joe, that's right.
And 4 world championships later, 6 World Series appearances, a three-peat, 4 in 5 years. They consider him the best manager since Stengel. Billy Martin's another great one in Yankee lore, albeit very controversial figure. But, as far as these Mets go, The problem for me is this, Zappy. You could blow it up, but are you close after you blow it up? And
No,
then
that's
some
why
of these other guys that are on high salary that you thought you were going to do something with, by the time they're winding down, some of your other guys are. I think what I'm trying to say is by the time you're getting out of hell, so to speak, with certain salaries, some of your other investments are going to be getting older where they might not contribute again. And I think right now, I'm going to tell Met fans something that they don't want to hear. Right now, their situation reminds me a lot of some shit that the Knicks would get into. Not completely horrific, not completely good on the top of things. They are like best case scenario in the middle, worst case scenario very bad. I think they are better than their record. There are some metrics in their statistics during the course of the year that don't scream complete failure. And yes, the Diaz thing does hurt because it puts a bigger toll on your bullpen. But there are so many things wrong. And at the end of the day, similarly to what happened to Joe Girardi last year with their rivals, the Phillies, they dumped him and they went on a run. Do I think that's this year's Mets? Absolutely not. Plus, I don't even know who they would hire, but I do have a suggestion.
Say it.
Carlos Beltran, the guy they wanted originally.
Yep.
And you know what? I think Carlos could do well.
I think
he certainly wasn't lighting it up in the for the Yes Network.
That's true, but he belongs in the dugout. That's the difference between he belongs.
Yeah, certain guys are not meant to be color commentators. I actually think Showalter, to your point, he's got to hang it up. Similar to what happened to Tony La Russa in Chicago coming back. Sometimes the game passes guys by, and I do believe that that's what has happened here with Buck Showalter. But the Mets are terrible. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But I'm going to tell you something that's the opposite of terrible. We're going to call it perfection. Domingo German pitches the 24th perfect game in Major League Baseball history. He is the fourth Yankee to achieve this feat and the first Dominican-born player to do so. Yankees also won today and took 2 out of 3 from the lowly Athletics. Zappy, I understand that we only beat, according to some people's measures, a single A team, a double A team, a minor league team, point to be made there. So I got to shout out my brother from another mother, Mr. Richard Dorney. Congrats on pitching a perfect game against a single A team. My reply to Mr. Dorney, we didn't play the Mets last night. And that team you're making fun of has a better record against the Atlanta Braves than you do. Oakland Athletics have 2 wins against the Atlanta Braves. The New York Mets have 1. Okay.
Look.
Let's get the humor out, and then I'm going to get serious about what Domingo did.
I was going to get straight to the serious because while there's been a lot of, not a lot, but people saying this and that, and it's usually the rivals. That's sports. The guy threw 97 pitches and only 22 were balls. Right. Or 99 pitches and only 22 were balls. I mean,
that's exceptional.
The guy was on.
The curveball was really working.
Yeah, and he still has to throw those pitches. And these are paid professionals. I mean, let's be real. Yes, the Athletics, that is the Yankees farm system. So they, eventually some of those guys are going to be Yankees.
Shout out Frankie Montes. Shout out Sonny Gray. Shout out Jason Giambi. Just to name a few.
Just to name a few.
But last time the A's received something. You want to get back more? Shout out Reggie Jackson.
This guy. No, but I think no matter what, these are Major League Baseball players, and a lot of these guys were also in the minor leagues at one point in their career.
Shout out Mike Gallego.
Mike Gallego. The impressive part is that if this is really unimpressive to some, then let me ask the question: when was the last time we saw a perfect game? And that was 11 years ago. It's in 2012.
King Felix.
We had 3 players in 2012. King Felix was the last one. Before that, it was Matt Cain while he was pitching for the Giants. And then they had Phil Humber. So, I mean, we haven't seen this in 11 years. So it goes to show that You literally need everything to go right, and it
And
usually starts with the pitch.
I do want to make a mention of something rather interesting. In the beginning of the season, on record, I'm going to call myself out, said, well, you're not going to see a perfect game for a long time, because we were very frantic and worried about what these new pitch clock variables were going to do. But I've come to find out that with pitchers staying warm and kind of going about their business a little quicker, and, there's still that gamesmanship where the batter will call time and da-da-da. I am pleasantly surprised, to your point that started off this show, that baseball is in a better place than it was. I still am not the craziest about the ghost runner, but I'm a hypocrite about the ghost runner. If it works in my favor, I love it. If it works against me, I hate it.
I think 100% of fans are 50-50 with the ghost runner.
Yeah, if it works, you love it. If you lose, you're just like, oh, this is bullshit. I hate this rule. Another interesting fact about this Domingo German situation: the fourth Yankee to achieve this feat, and every Yankee that has achieved this feat, their first name starts with the letter D. I'm talking about 1956.
Wait, hold on. Go ahead. Sorry.
Their first name starts with the letter D. Every Yankee that has done this. 1956, Don Larson in the World Series. 1998, David Wells. 1999, David Cohn. 2023, Domingo German. Another side note on this: in the 2021 regular season, if I had to take a guess, I feel that this was either late July, early August. I'm not going to quote myself. I'm just going off of my memory. Domingo German was flirting with a perfect game against the Boston Red Sox, the team that eventually eliminated us that year in a one-game playoff. When he approached the final few outs of the game, everything imploded. Whether it was the Greg Allen mistake, finally giving up a hit, the Yankees ultimately lost the game. And I remember a conversation I had with my Uncle Ralph saying, we got to get rid of Boone. We're imploding. This is the year that there's a lot to it. The Yankees have had a lot of ups and downs, because since the terrific start that the Yankees had going back to last year, that some were saying they could possibly shatter the 98 Yankee records, the Yankees have been a little bit better than 500. Right now, you're kind of picking at straws and you're just looking for anything. Josh Donaldson today, kind of shocking. Looking like 2015, I'm on the cover of the show, Josh Donaldson, crushing one 472 feet. You know how I feel about that guy. Last thing he did meaningful was hit a home run on my father's birthday.
Yeah, no kidding.
That was a good night. Shout out, Pops.
It's an unbelievable feat that
24 guys in the history of this beautiful game.
24 guys. I have a question for you, sir. While there have been 24 guys to do this, I'm sorry, 24 guys.
Yeah, nobody's done it twice to my understanding.
There have been 18 teams.
Okay.
I want to say 18. Hold on, let's see, 20 or 20 teams.
Okay.
Well, anyways, there have only been 4 teams. 4.
Mm-hmm.
2 teams that have had it done to them twice, and 2 teams that have had it done to them 3 times.
Okay.
So 18 total teams have been shut out. 4 teams have been shut out multiple times. I'll repeat it. 2 teams have been shut out twice, and 2 teams have been shut out 3 times. Can you name those 4 teams?
You really confused me on this question.
All right, so we're talking about the shutouts, and there's been 24 pitches to do it.
The perfect games.
Sorry.
Okay.
Perfect games. So out of the 24 shutouts, there's been 18 teams that have been shut out, meaning 4 teams have been shut out multiple times. Can you name which teams have been shut out twice or have had perfect games against them? And can you name which teams have had perfect games against them 3 times? I thought this was very interesting that I saw.
All right. So there's 4 teams?
4 teams.
All right. Off the top of my head, I'm going to go Cleveland Indians, now currently the Guardians. I'm going to go Detroit Tigers. Is that 2? I'm going to go Athletics. And I'm going to go the Reds. I don't know. That was like totally random.
You got one of them correct. The A's have been have had a perfect game thrown against them twice. The Twins have had a perfect game thrown against them twice. The Dodgers and the Rays have had perfect games thrown against them 3 times. The most surprising fact about that is the Rays have had it done to them 3 times, and they've been around for the
only
least
since
amount of time.
98 was their inaugural year.
Exactly. That's the part
year,
that where it's like,
the
wow.
year that the Yankees made all that history, that was the Rays' first year in the bigs. Unbelievable stuff. And I think the greatest thing, and our buddy Ryan Shedd, who was recently on the show, texted me this morning and said, "Bro, do you think Herman tuned into our show?" I'm like, "Why? You remember calling him out about a week ago and be like, I've seen enough of that guy. I wouldn't mind them moving on from him." And then he turns around and pitches a perfect game like nobody's business. Good stuff. And like I said, the Yankees right now, similar to what Idris, Shedd, and myself talked about, the ultimate end game is stay healthy, get through it. A couple of other teams I want to hit on here before we move it along to the other sports.
Yes.
Back with the buy or sell.
Yeah, I was going to go back to that too.
Cincinnati Reds are surprisingly having an interesting year, but they are a team that hasn't exactly been in a position to go out and be buyers or go out and make noise like that. And they also have a nice little young core. Can they make a move? It doesn't necessarily have to be an earth-shattering move of name notoriety, but some kind of move they can make to bolster their chances to make a run.
Yes. I think the Cincinnati Reds have got to be buyers.
You got to be.
It's pretty clear that this is a young, exciting team. You now have a healthy Joey Votto back. They need a pitcher. They traded away Castillo last year to the Mariners, and lo and behold, they're buyers this year. They've got to get out there. They've got to.
I wonder what the regret. Pitcher. I wonder if there's legitimate regret about that. I don't think so either. But I do think that what's going to be revealed, and it won't be revealed this particular season, because the team that is always a shoo-in to make the playoffs in the Central goes without saying, it's the Cardinals. We're going to be facing them coming up tomorrow. So, okay, you factor in the Cardinals having an off year, looking old, and looking disinterested. Okay. You got an upstart Pittsburgh Pirate team. You have a Cub team that looks like they're promising, but they're still not quite where they need to be. Then you enter in the Cincinnati Reds. It's crazy because the last time in my memory that I remember the Reds and the Pirates being relevant at the same time, you got to go way back to the Barry Bonds, Bobby Bonilla era. Mm-hmm. Like Chris Sabo, Barry Larkin. I'm talking about old school.
You know, which leads me to my next one. I don't know if you're going to bring this team up or not, but you're talking about the Reds and you bring up the Pirates. I actually think the Pirates are going to be sellers.
I do too.
And
because that's a National League version of our farm team.
Exactly. But
shout out Clay Holmes. Shout out Garrett Cole.
I think the Rangers are going to be going in on. We always talked about a certain outfielder, and that was Brian Reynolds. But I actually think it's going to be McCutchen that the Rangers are going to go after.
I can see that. The Rangers definitely need the upgrade. I think that they're more likely to do it than the Yankees because the Yankees, similarly to the Rangers, still have that issue. The Yankees do not have a guy that they can look at and say, you are my everyday left fielder. They have center figured when Bader is healthy. Obviously, it goes without saying that Judge man's down right, and Stanton only gets in the field if somebody needs an off day, like really bad. The Yankees have used a plethora of guys, whether it was Aaron Hicks earlier before he got out of there, Willie Calhoun. They had Franchi Cordero. Most recently, Billy McKinney. And you have Oswaldo Cabrera sightings. IKF. They need a left fielder.
They do.
And,
They really
and
do.
can Kutch come back? Because years ago I was irritated when we decided to bring back Brett Gardner because he was cheaper.
Right. I know. Oh man, I got
Or does Brett Gardner just come back and play left field because he's just about as? No, I'm just kidding. Sorry, Brett. That's like one of Brett's favorite Yankees ever. He modeled his game after Gardner.
Here's one for you in regards to buy or sell, and I think this is a really good one. There's obviously three teams in the American League East that are vying for a playoff position. Tampa Bay is
I know where
vying
you're
for the
going,
number
buddy.
one seed. No, I'm not going to the Yankees. I'm not going to the Yankees.
No, not my team. Not my team.
Okay, so the Baltimore Orioles, you're having a good season. You're in the playoffs right now. You are the third best record in the American League. You're obviously going to be a buyer, but do you make the splash and do you trade away a Jackson Holiday, who was your top pick in last year's draft?
Yeah.
And he made the futures game. This kid is Matt Holiday's son.
Indeed.
He's going to be a special talent. Do you trade away Jackson Holiday to put you over the top and have you in contention with the Rays when it comes down to the end of the year for the we'll say the ALDS or ALCS? If you're the Orioles, would you trade away Jackson Holiday?
To put it short and sweet, I'm going to say no, because the Orioles do not have to be in a rush for anybody, because you don't want to cut off your nose to spite your face. And what I mean by that is you don't want to give up on the future when you're already young and thriving. Be patient. Let it happen. Some of these other teams, it's a different kind of thirsty.
It is. That's it. It is, and that's what makes it very interesting, because.
But McCutcheon's a good shout. Back to that for a moment. That is a good shout and a sensible one.
I like it, and I think Kutch is going to be traded. I think the Reds. I think the Reds will be buyers, going back to them, and like I said, a pitcher. A couple of names that come to mind for the Reds.
Also, the Phillies might be on the fringe of buy or sell.
I think the Phillies are fine.
But this is the thing. Do you move Nola?
If you would have asked me that a few weeks ago, I would have said yes.
Now it kind of changes because of
it changes.
Interesting.
And because then I look at the Mets are positioning themselves to go after a Corbin Burns, for example. And then this
isn't finish your point, and I'm going to hit you with something I just thought of.
And we were talking about the Central, the American League, and here we are in the National League, where the Brewers are probably going to be sellers. American League, we're talking about two pitchers, Shane Bieber and Sonny Gray. Whoever is going to win that division, and I think we all think it's going to be the Guardians, so Shane Bieber is more likely to stay.
I would have to agree with you.
But you look at those two teams, and those are two teams where if you are the Reds, you try to do a deal with them, and more likely it's going to be the Guardians.
Well, the thing is, they're not going to deal him. Like if the Yankees, let's say hypothetically, wanted to get in on Bieber, they're getting that Yankee tax, that Yankee price. Like Bieber could be had for cheaper by an NL team, but they are not going to give him away cheap to the Yankees.
No.
They're going to want Austin Wells. They're going to want Jason Dominguez. And mind you, Jason Dominguez is not exactly thriving right now. But the minor leagues is a weird place, because sometimes I think guys that can thrive at the major league level sometimes get bored in the minors. And I do think that to a level, Dominguez might be going through a lack of focus. I don't necessarily think that speaks on his future. And plus, he's tearing it up in the show. I just want to make a shout out to Jason Dominguez. 2023 Yankees in the show. My team on the whole is looking more like the real Yankees. We're hovering around 500. I got it at a very high difficulty. We are coming up on roughly the 15-minute mark, coming up soon. We're going to hit on some NBA roundtable regarding Harden and Dame's futures. Anything else you want to hit on MLB before we move it along?
I saw a very interesting trade today. It actually involved the Yankees. It was a prediction. I want to know what your thoughts are about this. It involved you guys making a deal with the Padres for Blake Snell and Juan Soto for, I think Orlando Cabrera was one of them, and I want to say it was one or two of your minor league players. The Yankees are not necessarily out of it. I know you've been adamant that this season is.
Padres are not moving on from Soto. I'll say that right now.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Not after you gave him that
If
deal.
there's a Padre that's going to get moved on from, it's actually
Tatis.
Fernando Tatis. Yes.
Yeah, well, and I think that's why with Tatis, if you're the Padres, is Shohei might be that desperation.
And I've got a home for Tatis, and it's not going to be in the Big Apple either. If there's an earth-shattering trade that surprises the baseball world, and it might not even be this year, it could be in the offseason. Not even. I have a funny feeling that Tatis could make a lot of sense in Toronto, being yet another second-generation player.
Do you think the Blue Jays would move on from Bo Bichette just like that?
Not necessarily. You could put Tatis in the outfield.
Outfield, yeah, but oh man, if you're going to give up that much to put him into right field, I think that's a bad trade.
I think ultimately it comes down to who do you feel better playing the position. This isn't a Derek Jeter A-Rod situation where you knew A-Rod was probably a little more rounded at short, but Jeter was the captain. That was the sacrifice. You want to win a championship. You want to play for championships. You got to get your ass to third, and you got to smile about it, and you need to cover up those frost tips. I think we are done here on buy or sell.
Yep.
NBA roundtable: Harden and Dame's futures. Let's start with James Harden. Zap, what are your thoughts on his immediate future?
Well, we saw that he picked up his player option today. It's not a move that guarantees he's going to stay a Sixer. It's a move that helps facilitate a trade. So it's going to be interesting. I'm trying to think of teams that make sense for him, and I just can't think of one because the only team that makes sense is Houston. And if we're talking about playoff teams to go out and get a James Harden, I mean, you're not going to trade him to the Warriors. They're not going to. No, the Lakers,
it doesn't work. It doesn't work with the Warriors, and Steve Kerr's not going to go for his brand of basketball.
The one team that I could think of, and this is where it's actually really ironic, is with the Clippers, and that is working out a deal to get Paul George or Kawhi Leonard in a deal, because I could see a James Harden Kawhi Leonard type deal, because the Clippers just said they are not going to pay Kawhi Leonard.
Something like that I could actually see as being feasible. I did read an article today that the New York Knicks at minimum are going to take a look. But even though it's been more common in recent years that divisional rivals in the NBA do tend to make deals more so than in other sports, I do not see the New York Knicks bringing on a James Harden for one simple reason. If you're reinvesting in the vision of Tom Thibodeau, there is absolutely no way on planet Earth that James Harden is a Tom Thibodeau guy when the Knicks just brought back Josh Hart today, and the Knicks pride themselves on playing stingy defense and trying to have your defense create offense. I will say this: if Harden made a bit of an effort on defense and his offensive prowess, even though he's not the player he was, say, about 3 or 4 years ago, I might be a little more open to it. But no, not for my team. I do like your suggestion. Your suggestion actually does make a decent amount of sense. And I also want to make a mention that recently acquired Kristaps Porzingis, who is now a Boston Celtic. It's one of two things are going to happen. They're either going to realize that he doesn't have much left and that he's just never going to get better than what they thought his peak could have been, or he's going to learn quite a bit from some of the other guys that have been doing it at a high level for a long time, and he might be a pleasant surprise for Boston. To be continued, to be determined. Dame Lillard, we spoke about this recently during the NBA draft, that what the Portland Trailblazers did on some levels was with the motivation to appease Dame and make him feel that he should stay in Portland. I still don't think it's enough to keep him. Where do you think he moves to?
Two teams come to mind, and I actually saw a little article about this earlier today with one of them, and as I read it, I was like, that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, the Miami Heat, that I believe is when you talk about playoff teams, I think it's there. I don't think it's the Lakers. I don't think it's the Warriors, especially after the Warriors acquired Chris Paul. I think Miami Heat, but the dark horse, the crazy one would be is if he ended up as a San Antonio Spur. I think that would be interesting, and I think he'd be more than welcomed here. And not to mention when you now have your cornerstone future player, the next generational talent in a Wembanyama, and then you bring in a Dame Lillard, who, let's be honest, is loved all around the NBA.
Indeed.
There
Indeed.
is zero things to hate about the guy. The guy is stuck it out with the Blazers, and but it's just one of those. He's a player you want to see him move on to another team, but I could see the Spurs being the team that acquire him. And you look back at LaMarcus Aldridge, a former Blazer who ended up coming to the Spurs, and he was welcomed with open arms, and the city loved him. Dame Lillard would be that exact same thing, and probably more because it's Dame Lillard.
I
So
do
those
think
are the
Lillard, the appeal about going to San Antonio is that I see them as a team that's going to probably be like 3 years away from getting back to that brand of basketball that was synonymous with them, that they were constantly playing for championships. Popovich is such a phenomenal coach. And I do believe that in that regard, it's a blessing for Dame to play for a guy like a Popovich and have chances to win championships because, Denver's another team that they're going to be around for a little bit, but I don't think they're going to be around as long as, say, previous dynasties. I'm not going to put them in the dynasty category yet. It's been a long time, or at least a long enough time, since anybody's been flirting with that word dynasty. Golden State, it's kind of similar to what the Patriots did in the NFL in terms that it's spaced out with different players on some levels, but your key component's still there, whether it be the Splash Brothers and Draymond mainly. Draymond Green is safe. That's part of the reason why they shipped out Poole. Dame, Miami makes sense. San Antonio makes more sense. And I'm going to say there's an outside possibility that James Harden ends up in Miami because of the sheer fact that when you look at those 7 undrafted players, it caught up with them. And I like Jimmy Butler, but you can't put it all on Jimmy like that.
Ooh, I like that one, and I don't like it because I think about a James Harden, and we saw KD, Kyrie, and Harden.
That's the last guy I want to hit on. I want to hit on Kyrie before we move it along to the gambling situation.
There's only one team that makes sense for him. But anyways, no, with Harden is I just can't envision a time where Jimmy Butler, what we saw from him this past postseason was a phenomenal. Obviously, when it came down to playing the Nuggets were just a more dominant, the better team. But you bring in a James Harden, I feel like a James Harden, it goes back to what we saw with Jimmy Butler and Derrick Rose. I think it would be that type of thing where I don't think it would work, honestly, man. James Harden to me is more of a me guy, where Jimmy is more of a team guy, but Jimmy knows when to take over. And I think when you're clashing heads with someone like that, I just don't see it.
If you look at the trajectory of Harden's career, whether it be Brooklyn, OKC, Houston, most recently Philadelphia. It's so funny. KD, Harden, Westbrook all came up with the Thunder. And in 3 different ways, but in 3 similar ways, they are head cases to a level. I think KD is the most forgivable because KD is the best of the 3, but that's another situation. You look at Phoenix. They got close a couple of years ago, blew a 2-0 lead to the Milwaukee Bucks. They realized that they have to move on from Chris Paul. There's been flirtation that Kyrie Irving could be heading there. Even if he does, I still think it ends similar to how it ended this year because of the sheer fact that they don't have the bench.
You know what's funny about OKC is when you look at the players, you're talking about Harden, Westbrook, and KD. Don't forget about Serge Ibaka. Out of those 4, Serge Ibaka was the least liked. But when it's all said and done, Serge Ibaka became the most loved. And KD is one of the most hated players in the NBA today. Kyrie, same thing. And same with James Harden.
Shout out Next Door Strangers. That's a shot you can't block. No Ibaka.
No Ibaka.
All right. And on that note, we're coming up on the 5.5 minute mark. And this is going to be our final segment here. No safe bet. NFL cracking down on gambling violations amongst players, also coaches. We did see it with Miles Austin last year, as you mentioned to me and reminded me off air. More notably, Calvin Ridley, who's going to be getting a new start in Jacksonville. He was traded last year. He gets to finally play with them this year. Can you elaborate on some of the happenings regarding this?
Well, I mean, I think we know that we saw what happened with Calvin Ridley, and the NFL, Roger Goodell, they slammed the gavel and said, hey, look, we're not going to allow it. But to me, the NFL is a bit of a hypocrite because you're condoning gambling to all the viewers, everyone out there, and you're saying, hey, DraftKings or FanDuel. And when you have players, young guys who have money, some of these suspensions, they weren't even betting on their own respective sport. That's the sad thing.
It's a
placing a bet.
You know
I
what
don't
it
like
is?
it.
Everybody's hypersensitive because as gambling becomes more socially acceptable in terms of everyday fans in the other eras, it was more about going to bookies and some other sketch things that follow that. You talk about the Pete Rose thing. You talk about Tim Donaghy, who actually did prison time. You talk about how it's very controversial, and you have some people that are convinced that on certain layers and levels, sports do have a propensity for being a little questionable. Possibly some of the more, I don't know, radical thinkers are like, oh, this shit's fixed. It's always fixed. This is fixed. Point to be made is it's a bad look on a lot of levels. But to your point about hypocrisy, we talked about this like literally the other night on the phone. Roger Goodell, his legacy. Rob Manfred, MLB, his legacy. Manfred recently made a comment saying how he regrets not putting the hammer down on the Houston Astros. My solution was you make the Los Angeles Dodgers the world champions and you make the New York Yankees the American League champions. Or if you really want to stick it weird to the Houston Astros, you give each of the Dodgers and the Yankees a ring. If you really want to make it uncomfortable, hey, it's a tie. Why not? We didn't have a World Series in '94, and everybody knows the Expos would have beat my Yankees, and I'm a Yankee fan, just keeping it real. I'm telling the truth. As far as Roger Goodell goes, he had that witch hunt known as Deflategate, but he dropped the ball on Spygate, which was the real bad one. That one was so bad that he needed to protect the integrity of the league that he literally swept that under the rug. Then you go after Tom Brady years later over something that a lot of quarterbacks do. And I'm not saying that it wasn't shady, because that poor bastard who picked them off couldn't even keep the football. And you get to pick off the GOAT and you can't even keep the football? It was under investigation. But my point is, Tom Brady wins at the Supreme Court level. So now Roger Goodell looks like more of a horse's ass. These were missed and squandered opportunities. Major League Baseball, let's talk about some more hypocrisy. Talking about the integrity of the game, but took forever to honor the brave men who played in the Negro Leagues during a tumultuous time in this country where they were told, you're better, but you just can't play with us. That's a crock of shit. So there's so many layers and avenues to go with this. You want to be the moral police, you want to be the fun police, and then you just want to turn the blind eye because no matter how anybody will remember it, one thing is undeniable. In baseball, the steroid era put asses back in seats.
That was pretty impressive. I liked it. I like that little segment. Hey, look, we got a little over a minute left. I just want to say one thing and one thing only. As we are going into this holiday weekend, obviously it's the 4th of July, and most of this country is experiencing a heat wave like we've never seen before. Everyone out there, just hydrate. Make sure you do all the proper things you need to do as you got that barbecue going on the 4th of July, whatever the case may be, because, it's just, this is ridiculous. So everyone out there, happy 4th of July, be safe, and, grill up, smoke your meat, grill it, drink your beer, whatever you got to do. That's all I want to say to this episode, because I think this might be the last one until next week.
I also want to make a mention with the final 30 seconds. Shout out to the biggest fan of the show, my mother, Eunice.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Mom. She's the best. Can't put into words how amazing that woman is. So all I'm going to say is, Mom, just thank you. And that doesn't even do it justice. Until next time, he is Zappy. I am Richie, and we appreciate you guys watching. We'll be back